A virgin was forced to wed a young rancher, but desire changed what he thought he wanted. It was a quiet morning in the small countryside town of Willow Creek. The sun rose slowly over the fields, painting them in soft golden light. Birds chirped in the trees, and a gentle wind moved the tall grass in gentle waves. Life in the town was simple and predictable. Everyone knew each other, and the routines of daily life rarely changed. In one small house on the edge of the town lived a young woman named Clara. She was 17, with soft brown hair that fell to her shoulders and bright, curious eyes that seemed to notice everything around her. She had grown up surrounded by love from her parents, though her father had passed away when she was very young, leaving her mother to care for her and her younger brother. Clara's childhood had been peaceful, though sheltered. Her mother, Evelyn, had always been protective of her, teaching her the ways of the world slowly and carefully. Clara had learned to cook, clean, and manage the small garden behind their home. She had also learned to read, write, and to respect the traditions of their town. Her life had been simple, full of warmth and routine. She had friends in the village and enjoyed their company, but she had not yet experienced life beyond the town, and the thought of leaving or changing her life entirely had never crossed her mind. Everything changed the day her mother sat her down in the kitchen. The room smelled of fresh bread, but Clara barely noticed. Her mother's face was serious, her hands pressed tightly together on the table. Evelyn had been worried for months about the growing debts of the family farm. The crops had not been good the past few years, and the town's economy was slowly shrinking. The farm, which had been in the family for generations, was at risk of being lost. Evelyn had been searching for a solution, any solution, and she thought she had finally found one. "Clara," her mother began softly, "there's something important we need to talk about." Clara looked at her mother, sensing the weight of the words. Her heart began to beat faster. "I've been thinking a lot about our situation," her mother continued. "The farm, it's struggling. If we don't find a way to save it, we could lose everything. There is a young man, Thomas, a rancher from nearby. His family has offered to help us if you were willing to marry him." Clara's mind froze. She had known about Thomas in passing. He was well known in the region for his ranch, his strength, and his quiet demeanor. But the thought of marrying him, not out of love but out of necessity, filled her with a mixture of fear, confusion, and anger. "You mean you want me to marry him, just to save the farm?" she asked, her voice trembling. Evelyn nodded solemnly. "I know it's not what you want," she said, tears forming in her eyes. "But we have little choice. This is the only way to ensure our family survives." Clara felt as though the ground had shifted beneath her feet. She had always believed that she would choose whom she married when the time came, that she would marry someone she loved and who loved her in return. She had dreamed of a life filled with small joys, love, and independence. Now all those dreams felt fragile, like glass ready to shatter. She wanted to protest, to scream, but the look in her mother's eyes made her pause. Evelyn was not asking lightly. She was asking out of desperation, out of a need to protect the family. For the next few days, Clara tried to come to terms with the decision. She walked through the fields alone, letting the wind carry her thoughts. She imagined life on the ranch, life with Thomas. She tried to picture herself smiling, working alongside him, sharing meals and evenings by the fire. But each image felt foreign, uncomfortable. She didn't know this man. She didn't know if she could ever feel affection for him. And yet she also knew the consequences of saying no. Her family's farm, the home she had grown up in, could be lost forever. When the day of meeting Thomas arrived, Clara felt her stomach tighten with nerves. She had been told to be polite, respectful, and cooperative. She wanted to appear calm, though her mind was full of uncertainty. Thomas arrived in a carriage, tall and strong, with a serious expression. He greeted Clara politely, though he seemed cautious, as if unsure of how to behave in the situation. He had been told that this marriage was out of necessity as well. His family wanted to secure a partnership with Clara's family for the farm, and while he had agreed to it, he had no idea what to expect from the young woman he was to marry. The first meeting was quiet and formal. Clara and Thomas spoke about the farm, about routines, and about responsibilities. There was little warmth in their conversation, only the politeness expected in their town. Clara noticed that Thomas had a calm presence, and while it did not erase her fear, it made her feel slightly less anxious. She realized that while this marriage was not her choice, it did not have to be filled with anger or conflict. Perhaps they could navigate this new life with respect and patience. Still, the reality of the situation was heavy. That night, Clara lay awake in her small room, listening to the wind outside. She thought about the life she was leaving behind, the quiet days with her mother, the laughter with her friends, the small moments that made her feel safe. And she thought about the life ahead, working on a ranch, living with a stranger, learning to adapt to a new reality she had never wanted. Her heart ached, and a tear slipped down her cheek. She knew this was the beginning of a life she had not chosen, and the uncertainty of it frightened her. Meanwhile, Thomas also lay awake, staring at the ceiling of his room. He had agreed to the marriage for practical reasons, thinking that it would not change his life in any meaningful way. He had imagined a quiet arrangement, a partnership that would not require emotional investment. Yet, he found himself curious about Clara. Her intelligence, her gentleness, and the way she observed the world around her had caught his attention. He wondered if it was possible to respect someone and care for them at the same time. He did not yet understand the answer, but the thought lingered in his mind. The wedding day arrived quietly, without the grand celebrations that other marriages in the town had enjoyed. It was a simple ceremony, held in the small church at the center of the town. Clara walked down the aisle with her mother's hand gently holding hers. She felt the eyes of the congregation on her, their whispers and glances adding to the weight of the moment. Thomas stood at the altar, his expression calm and composed, though inside he felt the strange mix of duty and curiosity. They exchanged vows, promises spoken with respect rather than passion, and the marriage was sealed. After the ceremony, Clara and Thomas returned to the ranch. The house was large and unfamiliar, filled with the scent of horses, hay, and earth. Clara's footsteps echoed in the halls as she explored her new home. Thomas gave her a brief tour, showing her where she would sleep, the rooms she would use, and the tasks she would be responsible for. Everything felt strange and new, and yet there was a quiet rhythm to the life she would now lead. She realized that while fear still gripped her, there was also a possibility for adaptation, for finding a place in this new world. In the days that followed, Clara began to settle into her new life. She learned the routines of the ranch, worked alongside Thomas when necessary, and began to understand the responsibilities of her new role. She remained cautious, keeping her feelings guarded, yet she also discovered small joys in the work and in the quiet beauty of the ranch. Thomas, too, observed her with growing interest. He saw her strength, her patience, and the way she approached life with careful thought. Though neither of them had chosen this marriage willingly, they began to understand that respect and cooperation could be the foundation for something more, even if neither knew it yet. As weeks turned into months, Clara and Thomas continued to adjust to their new lives. They shared meals, conversations, and moments of quiet together. Each day brought challenges and small victories. While the initial fear and discomfort had not completely disappeared, there was a sense of rhythm to their days, a shared understanding that neither had expected. And in the quiet moments, when the sun set over the fields and the world seemed still, both Clara and Thomas began to wonder if perhaps, just perhaps, life had a way of surprising people in ways they could never have imagined. Life on the ranch was very different from what Clara had imagined. The mornings began early, long before the sun touched the fields. Clara had to wake while the air was still cool and the birds were just beginning their songs. She learned to help with chores, feeding the animals, collecting eggs, and keeping the house tidy. At first, everything felt overwhelming. The ranch was large, with barns and fences, fields stretching for miles, and animals that demanded attention every hour. Clara had never imagined that her days could be so long and filled with work, yet she faced each task with determination. She wanted to show Thomas that she could be responsible and reliable, even if she did not yet understand him. Thomas, meanwhile, observed her quietly. He had expected a young woman who would follow instructions without thought, someone who would be compliant and quiet. Clara, however, surprised him. She approached each task carefully, learning quickly, asking questions when necessary, and showing a patience he had not expected. There were moments when he would watch her from a distance, noting how she moved around the animals and the way she seemed to adapt to the ranch life despite her lack of experience. He began to realize that she was not weak or fragile, as he had assumed. She was strong, capable, and attentive, even though she was still shy and unsure of herself. Despite the growing respect, there remained a distance between them. Clara felt nervous around Thomas. His presence was commanding, and she often felt shy in his company. She struggled to find the right words when they spoke, worried that she might say something wrong or offend him in some way. Thomas, on the other hand, tried to maintain a careful distance. He did not want to appear too familiar, nor did he want to reveal too much of his thoughts. He had agreed to the marriage out of duty, not desire, and he was determined to keep his emotions controlled. Yet as days turned into weeks, he found himself noticing Clara more than he expected. Her quiet determination, the gentleness in her hands as she worked, and the sincerity in her expressions. One afternoon, a small accident occurred. While carrying a bucket of water across the barn, Clara slipped on the damp wooden floor. The water spilled and she stumbled, almost falling. Thomas, who had been nearby repairing a fence, rushed to catch her. His arms were steady and strong, and he prevented her from falling completely. Clara's heart raced, not from fear of the fall, but from the sudden contact and the concern in Thomas's eyes. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice low and serious. Clara nodded, embarrassed, and muttered a quiet, "Yes, thank you." She did not know why, but she felt a strange warmth in that moment, a small flicker of connection she had not expected. As the weeks continued, small moments like these happened more often. Thomas would notice when Clara was tired and offer to help, though he rarely spoke about feelings. Clara, in turn, began to see that Thomas was not harsh or unkind. He had a quiet patience, a seriousness that could sometimes feel distant, but it also carried a sense of reliability. He was someone who could be trusted, even if he did not express his thoughts freely. Slowly, Clara began to relax around him, learning to share small parts of her day, telling him about the animals, the chores, and the little things she found interesting. Thomas listened, sometimes offering a small comment, other times simply nodding. Though their conversations were limited, Clara began to feel that she was not entirely alone in this new life. Life on the ranch was not without challenges, whether animals and farm duties demanded constant attention. One morning, a storm hit the area. The sky turned dark and heavy rain fell, drenching the fields. The animals were restless and frightened, and Clara and Thomas had to work together to secure the barns and make sure everything was safe. In the chaos, Clara realized how much she relied on Thomas. He gave clear instructions, helped her lift heavy objects, and reassured her when things seemed impossible. The storm was frightening, but it also became a moment of bonding. Clara saw strength in Thomas that she had not noticed before, and Thomas saw courage in Clara. Despite the fear and the effort, they both felt a quiet satisfaction once the storm had passed, knowing they had managed together. In the evenings, when the chores were done and the animals were settled, Clara and Thomas would sometimes sit together in silence. The fire would crackle in the hearth, casting a warm glow around the room. Clara often found herself thinking about her life before the ranch, her mother, her friends, and the small comforts of home. Yet she also began to notice that these quiet moments with Thomas were comforting. She did not fully understand her feelings, but she appreciated his presence. Thomas, too, began to notice Clara in ways he could not explain. He found himself wondering about her thoughts, her dreams, and the things she had never told him. He began to respect her even more, realizing that this marriage, which he had once thought would be a simple arrangement, was starting to feel important in ways he had not anticipated. Over time, Clara began to explore the ranch more independently. She learned to ride horses, tend to the garden, and manage small tasks on her own. Each achievement gave her confidence and a sense of pride. Thomas noticed these changes and occasionally offered quiet praise. "You're learning fast," he said one evening as they repaired a fence together. Clara smiled softly. "I want to do my best," she replied. It was a simple exchange, but the respect and acknowledgement in Thomas's voice meant more to her than words could express. Even as their bond slowly grew, Clara often felt the weight of her situation. She had not chosen this marriage, and she still missed her old life. She worried about what the future might hold, and whether she would ever feel the love she had dreamed about. Thomas, meanwhile, wrestled with his own thoughts. He had imagined a life free from attachment, but now he found himself noticing Clara constantly, her kindness, her determination, and the way she approached life with careful thought. He did not yet understand his feelings, but he knew that he cared about her in ways that went beyond duty. A turning point came one afternoon when Clara became ill. She had been working long hours in the sun and had not rested properly. Her head ached and she felt weak and dizzy. Thomas noticed immediately, his concern evident. He insisted that she rest while he took over the chores, even though Clara protested. "I'll be fine," she said weakly, but Thomas ignored her words. He prepared food for her, made sure she had water, and stayed nearby to monitor her condition. Clara realized in that moment how much she had come to rely on his presence. She felt a sense of comfort in knowing that he cared, and for the first time, she allowed herself to feel a small spark of gratitude and warmth toward him. Thomas, on the other hand, felt emotions he had never expected. He was used to thinking logically, keeping his feelings controlled and avoiding attachment. But seeing Clara vulnerable made him realize that he genuinely cared for her well-being. He noticed the smallest details, how she shivered when she was cold, how her hand trembled when she was weak, and how her eyes, usually so bright and alert, looked tired and uncertain. For the first time, he wondered what it would mean to truly care for someone beyond duty or convenience. As Clara recovered, their relationship began to shift subtly. There was more conversation, more shared moments, and a growing sense of trust. They began to rely on each other, not just for chores or survival, but for emotional support. Clara felt safe in Thomas's presence, knowing that he would not abandon her or treat her unfairly. Thomas, in turn, found comfort in her presence, realizing that she brought a quiet warmth to his otherwise structured and predictable life. It was a slow, gentle process, but the walls they had both built around themselves began to soften. Evenings became a time of quiet reflection. Clara would sometimes speak about her childhood, her mother, and the dreams she had once had. Thomas would listen, offering small comments, questions, or reassurances. They did not speak of love or desire directly, but there was a growing understanding between them, a realization that they could rely on each other, and that their partnership, born of necessity, might hold unexpected possibilities. Clara began to hope that perhaps life could be richer than she had imagined, even in a marriage she had not chosen. Thomas began to recognize that responsibility could evolve into something meaningful, even something he might not have expected to want. As the weeks turned into months, the rhythm of life on the ranch became more natural. Clara had adjusted to her responsibilities, and Thomas had grown accustomed to her presence. While there was still a distance between them, that distance was shrinking, replaced by respect, understanding, and quiet companionship. Both of them knew that the future was uncertain, and that their feelings were still evolving, but for the first time, they felt a sense of possibility, a belief that this marriage, which had begun as an arrangement, might lead to something deeper and more meaningful. Life on the ranch was beginning to feel more familiar for Clara, though it still held its share of challenges. The seasons were changing now, and with autumn approaching, the days grew shorter and the work more demanding. The harvest needed careful attention, and the livestock required extra care to prepare for the coming cold months. Clara moved through each day with a growing confidence. She had learned to ride horses better, manage the chores efficiently, and even repair small problems around the ranch without asking for help. Yet, despite her growing independence, there were moments when she still felt unsure, especially in the presence of Thomas. Thomas had also been noticing changes within himself. He had agreed to the marriage for practical reasons and had believed that he could remain emotionally detached, but he found himself thinking about Clara more often than he expected. Her quiet strength, her gentle care for the animals, and the way she approached each task with determination and thoughtfulness caught his attention. Sometimes, when she wasn't looking, he would watch her work, noticing the small details, the way her hands moved, the slight crease of concentration on her forehead, or the small smile she gave when something went well. He began to realize that she was not just a companion by obligation, but someone whose presence had begun to matter to him more than he had imagined. One afternoon, Thomas asked Clara to help him repair a fence at the far end of the ranch. It was a warm day, the sun high and bright in the sky, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of hay and wildflowers. Clara grabbed the tools, and together they worked in silence for a time. Then, as Thomas was lifting a heavy plank of wood, he slipped slightly on the uneven ground. Clara rushed to steady him, placing her hands on his arm. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice filled with concern. Thomas laughed softly, shaking his head. "I'm fine," he replied, though the brief moment had made him realize how much he relied on her quick attention and care. He also noticed the subtle way her concern made him feel something unfamiliar, an awareness of being noticed, cared for, and valued. Over the next few days, the small bond between them grew, though neither fully understood it. Clara found herself thinking about Thomas when she was alone. She wondered what he was thinking, why he sometimes looked so serious, and whether he noticed her efforts on the ranch. She realized that she cared about his opinions and wanted his approval, even though she sometimes resisted the idea of feeling dependent on him. Meanwhile, Thomas struggled with his own confusion. He had not expected to feel protective, to feel drawn to someone he had not chosen freely. And yet, he could not ignore the growing curiosity, respect, and something more, a subtle stir of desire that he had tried to avoid. An unexpected challenge soon brought them closer. A neighboring rancher had a fire in his barn, and the smoke spread toward their property. Thomas and Clara had to act quickly to secure their own animals and prevent the fire from spreading. They worked together through panic and urgency, moving horses, securing fences, and calming frightened animals. In the heat of the moment, Clara discovered reserves of courage she did not know she had. She gave clear instructions to the few workers helping them and handled the animals with steady hands, even as the smoke made her eyes water. Thomas was impressed and deeply grateful for her composure. He realized that Clara was far stronger than he had assumed, both physically and mentally, and it made him feel something he could not yet name: pride, admiration, and an increasing desire to protect her. After the fire was finally contained and the animals were safe, they sat together on a hill overlooking the ranch, catching their breath. The sunset painted the sky with shades of orange and pink, and a quiet settled over the land. Clara felt exhausted, yet strangely exhilarated. She looked at Thomas and noticed the tension in his shoulders slowly relaxing. "We did it," she said softly, a small smile on her lips. Thomas nodded, his eyes meeting hers for a moment longer than usual. "Yes," he replied, "we did." The simplicity of the words, the shared relief, and the quiet acknowledgement of their teamwork made a subtle but powerful connection between them. As the days passed, Thomas began noticing more about Clara that unsettled him in ways he had not anticipated. He observed her kindness toward the animals, the way she remembered small details about the ranch, and the quiet intelligence she displayed in solving problems. These were not qualities he had expected to admire so deeply. Each day, he felt his feelings grow in ways he struggled to understand. He realized that he had started to care for her beyond respect, beyond gratitude, and that his heart was slowly opening to feelings he had thought he could avoid. Clara, too, was beginning to notice the subtle changes in herself. She found that she anticipated Thomas's moods, felt satisfaction when he seemed pleased, and quietly missed his presence when he was busy with tasks elsewhere. She began to recognize that her emotions were shifting. What had once been a sense of duty, of surviving and fulfilling responsibilities, was slowly becoming an awareness that Thomas mattered to her more than she wanted to admit. She felt a strange excitement when he smiled at her or offered guidance, and a quiet longing when their conversations were brief or interrupted. One evening, a minor accident happened that brought the change to the surface. Clara had gone to check the barn during a sudden rainstorm. The mud made the ground slippery and she slipped, falling hard and twisting her ankle. Thomas, who had been in the field nearby, heard her cry out and ran immediately to her side. He helped her to her feet and guided her back to the house, supporting her weight carefully. Clara winced but tried to reassure him. "I'll be fine," she said, but Thomas would not let her continue alone. He stayed with her, helped her sit, and insisted she rest while he tended to the remaining chores. That night, as he wrapped a cloth around her ankle, Thomas felt a surge of protectiveness he had never experienced before. He realized that he genuinely did not want her to be hurt, and that the thought of her suffering made him anxious in a way he could not ignore. The next morning, Thomas brought her breakfast and a cup of warm tea. He tried to speak casually, but his concern for her was evident in the way he watched her carefully, ensuring she moved slowly and comfortably. Clara felt a warmth in her heart at his attentiveness. She realized that this was more than the polite concern of a husband. It was care, genuine care, and it stirred feelings she was only beginning to recognize. She felt a subtle shift within herself, admiration, respect, and the beginnings of affection toward the man she had once viewed as distant and unfamiliar. From that moment, their interactions began to change subtly. Thomas would offer small gestures of kindness, like carrying a heavy bucket or closing the barn doors for her, and Clara noticed and appreciated them. They began to speak more openly about the tasks of the ranch, but there was also more conversation about personal thoughts and experiences. Clara shared stories of her childhood, her dreams, and her fears, while Thomas occasionally spoke of his life before the ranch, the responsibilities he carried, and the lessons he had learned. These conversations allowed them to see each other as people, not just as partners in an arrangement. The bond between them continued to deepen over time. Clara began to understand Thomas's quiet moments, his seriousness, and the subtle ways he expressed care. Thomas, in turn, began to understand Clara's resilience, intelligence, and the small gestures that revealed her feelings. There were no grand declarations of love, no dramatic confessions, yet the quiet shifts in their behavior spoke volumes. Respect, trust, and a slowly growing emotional intimacy formed the foundation of their relationship. One afternoon, as they worked together in the fields, Thomas paused to watch Clara. She was tending to the horses with skill and gentleness, speaking softly to them as if they could understand her words. For a moment, he was struck by how beautiful and capable she was, not just in appearance but in essence. He realized that the feelings stirring within him were no longer simply respect or duty. They were desire, emotional attachment, and a wish to be near her. The realization both excited and confused him, for he had not expected this marriage to stir such feelings. Clara noticed the subtle change in him as well. She felt a quiet satisfaction when he praised her efforts, a small flutter of joy when he lingered near her during tasks, and a growing sense of trust that allowed her to feel safe and seen. She realized that she had started to care deeply about him, not just as a husband by arrangement, but as a person whose presence brought comfort, protection, and a sense of belonging. By the end of the season, both Clara and Thomas were aware that their relationship had changed. What had begun as a formal arrangement born of necessity had evolved into something more meaningful. They were no longer strangers living under one roof. They were companions who relied on each other, respected each other, and had begun to understand the subtle stirrings of desire and affection. While neither could yet name the exact nature of their feelings, the shift was undeniable. They had grown closer, not just through shared work, but through shared experiences, trust, and the slow recognition that what they felt for each other was changing their hearts in ways they could not ignore. The chill of early winter settled over the ranch, painting the fields in shades of gray and white. The days were shorter now, and the nights colder, but there was a quiet beauty in the season. Clara had grown stronger and more confident, moving through her daily tasks with steady hands and a calm mind. She had learned to manage the animals, repair fences, and even handle the bookkeeping of the ranch alongside Thomas. Yet, despite her competence, there were moments when her heart felt restless, moments when her thoughts wandered to the unspoken feelings she had for him. Thomas, too, had been thinking more about Clara than ever before. He found that he could not ignore the warmth that her presence brought him. Her laughter, her careful attention to the animals, and the way she faced each challenge with patience and determination had begun to awaken feelings he had never expected. He realized that what had once been a marriage of obligation was slowly transforming into a relationship of desire, care, and understanding. He felt a strong pull toward her, though he struggled to understand it fully. It was no longer just respect or admiration. It was something deeper, something he could not deny. One evening, a heavy snowstorm struck the area. The wind howled across the fields, and the snow piled quickly, threatening the safety of the animals. Clara and Thomas worked together to bring the animals inside, secure the barns, and make sure the ranch was safe. The storm was fierce, and the work was exhausting, but it brought them together in a way nothing else had. Thomas noticed Clara's unwavering determination as she moved through the snow, her hands red and frozen, yet her movements precise and calm. He realized in that moment how much he relied on her strength and presence. After the storm had passed, they returned to the warmth of the house. Clara, shivering from the cold, wrapped herself in a thick blanket by the fire. Thomas sat across from her, his own coat still dusted with snow. They were both quiet for a while, listening to the wind outside, but there was a shared sense of relief and accomplishment. Clara looked at him and smiled, feeling a small spark of connection. "We did well today," she said softly. Thomas nodded, meeting her eyes. "Yes, we did," he replied, his voice carrying a warmth he rarely allowed himself to show. In that simple exchange, they felt the first true sense of emotional intimacy, a recognition that they had faced challenges together and had come out stronger. In the days that followed, the subtle changes in their relationship became more apparent. Thomas began to notice small things about Clara that touched him deeply. The way she moved around the house, the gentleness with which she spoke to the animals, and even the way she paused to admire the sunrise all seemed to captivate him. He found himself thinking about her constantly, wondering what she was doing when he was busy, and feeling a quiet longing when she was not near. For the first time, he realized that he was not just drawn to her strength and patience, but to her very being, to the essence of who she was. Clara, on her part, began to feel a growing sense of comfort and trust around Thomas. She noticed the small gestures he made, the way he would ensure her drink was warm, how he adjusted the blankets around her when she was tired, or the quiet reassurance in his voice when she worried about the ranch. These gestures, small as they were, filled her heart with warmth and a sense of belonging she had never experienced before. She began to see him not as the distant stranger she had married, but as someone she could rely on, someone whose presence made the world feel safer and more secure. One afternoon, Thomas invited Clara to help him organize the barn for the winter. The task was tedious and cold, but working side by side allowed them to speak more freely than they had in weeks. Clara shared memories of her childhood, stories of her friends, and the hopes she once held for her future. Thomas listened carefully, occasionally sharing small details of his own life. He told her about his childhood on the ranch, the lessons he had learned from his father, and the responsibilities he had carried since he was young. These conversations, though simple, created a deeper understanding between them. They began to see each other as partners not only in work but in life, as people who could share their thoughts and feelings without fear of judgment. As the season progressed, Thomas found himself thinking about Clara in ways he had never expected. He noticed how her eyes sparkled when she spoke about something she loved, how her hands moved gracefully as she worked, and how her laughter could lighten even the heaviest of days. He began to feel a desire not just to be near her but to protect her, support her, and share his life with her. He realized that desire was not only physical, it was emotional and rooted in care, trust, and admiration. Clara had become essential to his happiness in ways he could not have imagined when he first agreed to the marriage. Clara, too, began to recognize her feelings for Thomas. She felt excitement when he spoke kindly to her, a flutter of joy when he smiled in her direction, and a quiet longing when he was busy elsewhere. She realized that she was not only growing to respect him, but also beginning to desire his presence, his attention, and his companionship. She felt safe around him in a way she had never felt with anyone else, and that safety allowed her heart to open slowly to the possibility of love. One evening, a minor accident brought their emotions closer to the surface. Clara had been carrying a stack of hay when she tripped over a small rock hidden under the snow. Thomas, who had been nearby, rushed to her side. He steadied her, his hands firm but gentle. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice laced with concern. Clara nodded, though her cheeks flushed from embarrassment and the closeness of the moment. Thomas did not release her immediately. He held her for a few seconds longer than necessary, realizing that he did not want the moment to end. Clara felt her heart beat faster, a mix of fear, excitement, and something deeper she could not name. From that day on, their relationship began to shift in subtle but undeniable ways. Thomas became more attentive, seeking moments to be near Clara, offering small gestures of kindness and support. Clara, in turn, became more open, sharing her thoughts, her dreams, and her worries. They began to communicate not just through words, but through shared experiences, glances, and actions. The trust and respect they had built now formed the foundation for a deeper emotional connection. One cold winter morning, Clara woke to find Thomas already awake, tending to the animals. He noticed her stirring and smiled, a small gesture that made her heart warm despite the chill. "Good morning," he said softly. "Did you sleep well?" Clara nodded, feeling a sense of comfort in his voice. "Yes, I did. Thank you," she replied. It was a simple conversation, but it carried a quiet intimacy that both of them were beginning to understand. They were learning to care for each other in ways that went beyond obligation, beyond duty, and into something much more personal. As winter deepened, they spent more time together inside the warmth of the house. They shared meals, worked on small projects, and sometimes simply sat by the fire in silence, enjoying the presence of each other. Clara found that she looked forward to these moments, feeling a sense of peace and happiness she had never experienced before. Thomas, too, began to realize that he could no longer imagine life without her nearby. He cared for her deeply, in ways that were both gentle and passionate, though he struggled to name the feelings that had grown within him. One evening, as snow fell softly outside, Thomas and Clara sat together in the kitchen. Clara was working on mending clothes while Thomas prepared dinner. For the first time, they spoke openly about their feelings. "I never expected to feel this way," Thomas admitted quietly, his eyes on her. Clara paused, her hands stilling. "What do you mean?" she asked softly. Thomas took a deep breath. "I mean, I care about you more than I thought I ever could. I didn't expect to want this, but I do. I want to be here with you, not just because I have to, but because I want to." Clara looked at him, her heart swelling with emotion. She realized that she felt the same way, though it had taken her time to recognize it. "I feel the same," she said softly. "I care about you too. I want to be with you, not because I have to, but because I want to." In that moment, the distance between them disappeared. They were no longer husband and wife by obligation, but partners in heart and mind, connected by respect, trust, and desire. From that day on, their relationship continued to grow. They worked together, laughed together, and supported each other through the challenges of ranch life. Desire had transformed into understanding, and understanding had blossomed into a quiet, enduring love. The marriage that had begun as an arrangement was now something far richer, built on patience, care, and the slow recognition of the deep connection they shared. Winter was slowly giving way to spring on the ranch. The snow melted, revealing the first green shoots of grass, and the days grew warmer and longer. The world seemed renewed, and with it, so did Clara and Thomas's lives. Their relationship had changed completely from the early days of their marriage. What had begun as an arrangement born out of necessity had transformed into something neither of them had expected: trust, affection, and a quiet love that grew stronger each day. Clara awoke one morning to the smell of fresh bread baking in the kitchen. The sunlight streamed through the window, highlighting the simple beauty of the ranch. Thomas was already up, feeding the animals and checking the fences. He glanced over at Clara with a small, warm smile. She felt her heart flutter, realizing how much she had grown accustomed to seeing him start the day beside her, working with a calm focus that reassured her. She dressed quickly and joined him in the barn, where the animals awaited attention. Together they moved through the morning chores, their movements synchronized, their silence comfortable rather than tense. Thomas had noticed changes in Clara that made him proud. She was confident, capable, and independent, yet gentle and thoughtful. He admired the way she cared for the animals and the ranch, the way she approached every task with determination, and how she still found time to smile and laugh despite the hard work. He realized that desire had grown into something deeper, love rooted in respect and understanding. He wanted to protect her, support her, and share every part of his life with her. And he felt that she wanted the same, even if she had not spoken it openly yet. One afternoon, they took a rare break and walked together through the fields. The sun was warm on their faces, and the soft breeze carried the scent of blooming flowers. Clara laughed as a young foal ran past them, kicking up dust and small clumps of dirt. Thomas smiled, feeling a contentment he had never known before. They talked about their dreams, their hopes, and even the small fears they still carried. Clara admitted that she had once been scared of the marriage and uncertain about life on the ranch, and Thomas shared how he had feared becoming emotionally attached. They laughed softly at the contrast between the past and the present, realizing how far they had come. The emotional closeness between them deepened over the following weeks. They began to spend more time together in ways that strengthened their bond. Clara would help Thomas plan for the upcoming planting season, and he would involve her in decision-making about the ranch. They shared meals, worked on projects side by side, and even began to plan small celebrations for the town festivals. In these moments, neither felt the pressure of duty. They simply enjoyed each other's company and the satisfaction of building a life together. One evening, Thomas invited Clara to join him on the porch. The stars were bright in the clear sky, and the air carried the scent of spring blossoms. He spoke softly, "Clara, I want to ask you something important." Clara looked at him, sensing the seriousness in his tone. Thomas took a deep breath. "I've realized that I don't just want to be here because I have to. I want to be here because I choose you. I want us to build our lives together, not out of obligation, but because I love and respect you." "I hope you feel the same." Clara's heart swelled. She had hoped he would say this, and in that moment she realized that her feelings matched his completely. "Thomas," she said softly, "I've wanted that too. I love you and I want to share my life with you, not because I have to, but because I choose you as well." From that night on, their love became more intentional. They expressed care and affection in subtle, meaningful ways. Thomas would leave warm blankets for Clara near the fire, help her with difficult chores, and spend time simply listening to her. Clara would prepare small surprises for him, share stories from her day, and offer gentle encouragement when he faced challenges. Their relationship had grown from respect and desire into a mature, balanced love built on trust, mutual support, and shared life. The ranch itself seemed to reflect their transformation. The fences were repaired, the animals were thriving, and the crops were growing under careful attention. Life, once uncertain and filled with fear, now held promise and hope. Clara and Thomas moved as a team, their partnership strengthened by the hardships they had faced together. They laughed together at small mishaps, celebrated successes with quiet joy, and found comfort in the simple rhythms of ranch life. One day, a visiting friend of Thomas's asked him, "How is it that you two work so well together?" Thomas smiled, glancing at Clara, who was busy tending to the garden. "Because we respect each other," he replied. "Because we care for each other, and we choose to be together every day." Clara looked up and smiled at him, her eyes reflecting the shared understanding between them. They did not need grand declarations. Everyday actions, quiet support, and shared moments were proof enough of their love. Despite the long hours and hard work, there were moments of tenderness that strengthened their bond. A shared cup of tea on a cold morning, a gentle touch while helping each other with chores, or a quiet conversation by the fire, all became expressions of love and connection. Desire, once hesitant and uncertain, had transformed into a deep emotional intimacy that neither had expected but both cherished. The story of Clara and Thomas spread quietly in the town. People noticed the change in both of them, the way Clara moved with confidence and grace, and the way Thomas seemed calmer, happier, and more engaged. Their marriage, once seen as a practical arrangement, had grown into a genuine partnership built on mutual respect, understanding, and love. While outsiders might have doubted that anything meaningful could come from a marriage born of necessity, Clara and Thomas proved that patience, care, and willingness to grow together could transform life in unexpected ways. As spring fully arrived, Clara and Thomas looked toward the future with hope and determination. They began planning improvements to the ranch, dreaming of expanding their home, and considering ways to ensure the land would remain in good hands for years to come. Each decision was made together, with careful thought and shared responsibility. Their partnership was no longer just a marriage, it was a life built together, grounded in trust, care, and mutual commitment. One evening, as the sun set over the fields, Clara and Thomas stood together on the porch, holding hands and watching the light fade behind the hills. Clara felt a sense of peace she had never known in her early years, a warmth that came from being seen, valued, and loved. Thomas felt a similar contentment, knowing that he had found a partner who shared not only the burdens of life but also its joys. In that moment, neither thought of the past fears, the forced marriage, or the uncertainty they had once faced. All that mattered was the life they had built together, the bond they had nurtured, and the love that had grown stronger with each passing day. Clara looked up at Thomas and smiled, feeling gratitude for everything they had overcome together. Thomas returned her smile, squeezing her hand gently. They did not need to speak. The quiet understanding between them said everything. They had chosen each other, not out of obligation, but out of heart, respect, and true affection. The future, once uncertain, now seemed full of promise. Their story, though simple in its details, carried a powerful message. That love could grow in the most unexpected ways, that patience and understanding could transform duty into desire, and that true connection often arises not from force or circumstance but from shared life, mutual respect, and the willingness to open one's heart. Clara and Thomas had begun as strangers bound by necessity, but they had become partners, companions, and ultimately, two people whose love was forged by the trials and triumphs of life together. By the time the first flowers of spring bloomed across the ranch, Clara and Thomas had fully embraced their life together. Their love was no longer quiet and hesitant. It was steady, rooted in respect, affection, and desire. Each day brought new challenges, but they faced them side by side, knowing that they could rely on each other in every way. The ranch, once a place of uncertainty and fear, had become a home filled with warmth, laughter, and the shared promise of a bright future. And so, their story concluded not with grand gestures or dramatic events, but with the quiet, enduring affirmation that desire and affection, when guided by patience and respect, could transform lives. Clara and Thomas chose each other every day, their love growing stronger with each shared sunrise and every challenge they faced together. The marriage that had begun as necessity had become something far more meaningful, a life, a partnership, and a love that neither had anticipated but both cherished completely.